Good evening, and welcome to the Council Advisory Committee CAC meeting of the 13th of February 2023. February is recognized as African Heritage Month. This year's African Heritage Month provincial theme is Seas of Struggle, African Peoples from Shore to Shore, recognizes the resilience, strength, and determination of people of African descent from the shores of Africa to the shores of Nova Scotia, with the Atlantic Ocean being the everlasting connection. The theme highlights the role the sea has played in the long-standing history of people of African descent and the African Nova Scotians, specifically in the development of Canada and Nova Scotia. This year's theme aligns with the United Nations International Decade for People of African Descent, 2015 to 2024. The goal is to strengthen global cooperation in support of people of African descent, increase awareness, and recognize their full and equal participation in society. This meeting is being held in chambers, and this meeting is being live streamed on Facebook Live. The most up-to-date meeting package is on the Town of Kentville website. This meeting is called to order. Have all of the councillors received and reviewed their meeting package? Does any member of council have information pertaining to a matter before this council which has not been publicly circulated? As the Council Advisory Committee, CAC, we will vote as a committee to either send business forward to the council meeting for ratification, return to staff for further information or review, or defeat the recommendation. I will remind members of council that we should continue to be mindful of our decision-making wheel to make balanced and respectful decisions while adhering to our code of conduct. This council, through policy and by motion, has adopted Robert's Rules as our rules of order. This council will be voting electronically on all motions except administrative, which will be by show of hands. And are there any conflict of interest issues that council should be aware of before the meeting commences? The chair notes that we have quorum. We have been provided with a proposed agenda. CAO, are there any further additions or deletions to this agenda?
Thank you, Mayor Snow. I have one other item that I would recommend, which would be in camera 10B, and this is a legal issue with regards to land.
Thank you. So for members of council, if you could amend your agendas, 10B, legal, land. And council, is there anything further for additions or deletions to the agenda? If not, could I have a motion to adopt the agenda as amended? Deputy Mayor, thank you. Councillor York for the second. All those in favor? Those opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you very much. You have been provided with the Council Advisory Committee meetings of January the 9th, and they have been distributed for approval. If there are no changes, they will be approved as distributed. If there are changes, the recording secretary will annotate those. Are there any changes to our minutes from our last meeting? None? All right. Moving right along then. So we have two presentations this evening. The first one is the Kentville Business Community with an annual report, and Paul Dixon and Genevieve will be presenting our tag team. And as you will recall, council, we were expecting to see something at the end of January. However, we will see something at the end of February, pending the final legal review on that. And then we have the property valuation services with Paul Beasley. So without further ado, let's get started with the KBC annual report.
Hi, everyone.
Great, good.
Rough night.
Hey, Paul.
I love presentations. Is there a slide presentation ready to go?
Just have to open the PowerPoint.
Okay.
Under a bar at the bottom. Yep.
There we go.
And full screen.
Now we're ready to go. Okay. A year goes by quickly. And here we are. So first of all, our mission, for those that aren't aware, KBC works to create a community which is supportive and welcoming to current and future businesses, professionals, and organizations, and to attract people to shop, use services, and spend time in Kentville. Our strategic pillars are engagement and communication, marketing and promotion, infrastructure and investment, and support and recognition. For our expenses this year, we illustrated it by breaking it down into percentages. Operations, we only spend 3%. For events, 11%. Personnel, 21%. Marketing promotions, 13%. Facade and decor grants, 21%. And placemaking, 31%. Our revenue for this year, 2% from sponsorships, 8% from cash reserves, 51% from the Town of Kentville Commercial Levy, and grants this year we secured 39% of our overall expenditures.
All right. Being mindful of our 10 minutes, I will try to breeze through these slides. So we just have each of those expenses broken down by slide, so I'll go through them one at a time. First of all, we had 21% of our budget this year go to personnel. So that includes the executive director, which is myself, and I work 20 hours a week for KBC. We have a communications coordinator, the smiling Doug Ralph there, who works 10 hours a week for KBC. And this year we were able to hire a summer student there in the middle, Adrielle Bowden, who is helping out with the mural festival in that photo. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention all of the wonderful volunteers that contribute to this organization as well. You really do inherit a lot of people through our board. We have an 8-person board. We have 3 working committees, our facade program committee, our promotions committee, and our events committee. And then we have 2 sub-events committees for the Multicultural Festival and Mural Festival. So add it all together, it really, so we spent the $27,500 that we get for a facade through the town. And then we had a really large seasonal decor budget this year of just over $21,000. That's because we received a grant of $8,000 for downtown beautification, and we put that to the window paintings that we did during Harvest Festival. This was really popular and a lot of interest in doing it again, so we raised our seasonal decor budget a bit in our proposed 23-24 budget. Placemaking was 31%. This was really unprecedented because there were some COVID recovery grants available that we applied for. So this is not something that usually KBC does, but we got $50,000 from Develop Nova Scotia and another $25,000 from ACOA to do some downtown revitalization and placemaking projects. We really focused our efforts on Center Square, and you can see some of the projects that we did here. There is some signage going around Center Square that hasn't been installed yet. It's tucked away in our storage right now, but you'll see it in the spring. We did a light installation under the gazebo. This has lots of different presets so that we can change it depending on the season and what's happening. Right now, if you haven't noticed, there's the lights are red, green, and yellow for Black History Month. We also have the festival lighting. I'm just gonna get some water. Festival lighting and poles over Center Square. You probably noticed the Adirondack chairs and the fire pits that we had, the turf. And so this really makes it more of a pedestrianized space so that people feel comfortable using the space. You'll also see we had people involved in painting these planters that we put around as barricades, because in our input sessions, we found that people just found that Center Square felt like it was for vehicular traffic and not for pedestrian traffic, and they really wanted to have a barrier between pedestrians and vehicles. And so we use these planters as a way to create a barrier. For community events, we spent 11% of our budget. That went to the Mural Festival, the community supper during the Harvest Festival, and the Holidays Festival, as well as event support. We were able to support the Canada Cup this year, as well as the Pumpkin Walk. And also some of the funding went to the gazebo programming to activate Center Square. 13% of the budget went to marketing and promotions. One of the biggie this year was the extended hours. We heard from some businesses that they wanted to have some late night hours, but they weren't willing to do it unless there was a critical mass of businesses also doing it. So we had over 20 businesses jump on board, and it was kind of like a pilot for 6 weeks right before the Christmas season when shopping was busy, and we really promoted the heck out of that. Right now, we're doing one of our giveaways for Leave Your Heart in Kentville during Valentine's, and we also had a lot of synergies with the other BIDs across the province and did this provincial marketing campaign called Buy Local Again, which encouraged people to get back out onto their main street and start supporting businesses after COVID lockdowns. Okay.
So this year, we wanted to focus on making sure we got you the financials. Got them, Kathy?
I got them. Thank you.
So this year, in front of you now, you'll see our proposed budget. So just a couple of key points I'll bring to your attention there. So looking at an overall core funding of 96.6, which is a 5% increase over the previous year. If you go down to expenses, our executive director salaries increased from 31.2 to 43,000. This is to allow for more direct hours, so Genevieve can continue to focus on the great work that's already being done. A little further down under multimedia, you'll see a big drop from 14,000 in 2022 to 5,000 in 2023. That's because the expense is really going to be used in May, but out of the 2022 budget. So we didn't need to budget for it again this year. And we continue to support our facade program and our new business incentive program, which still has a lot of attention even after all these years. So we want to continue that program because we know we still have several opportunities in town that we want to try to take advantage of. Seasonal decor grants further down, we increased from 10,000 to 13,000. As Genevieve pointed out in her presentation, we've had a real uptake in businesses. Every single event we ran last year, we would signify a budget with a certain number of businesses, and we always had more businesses participate than we actually budgeted for, and we still went ahead and supported them from our reserves. And the next big item is the event implementation. We're going from 13,000 to 18,000, which is bringing the multicultural festival back post-pandemic. So, does anyone have any questions on the proposed budget? Yes, Kathy?
Just put your mic on, Kathy, please. Thank you. Go ahead.
There. Okay, they're very picky. And I don't mean to be picky, but I just wanted a little bit of explanation on them.
Absolutely.
That's all. Meals and entertainment, 300, and travel, 200. Could you explain those?
Could you point out exactly?
We
what
didn't
the-
even spend travel this year, but we put that in our budget every year just in case there's perhaps a conference in Halifax or an event we want to go to promote what we're doing in town. For meals, I don't think we spent that much this year. Again, that is in case there's meetings with meals.
Let's see.
What did we spend this year?
It's just in budgeted as
Yeah.
500.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking that almost every other committee that I've sat on has done away with meals and entertainment and that sort of thing. So I was just, that's why I asked that question. I just wanted an
Sign up
explanation.
For volunteers for the Christmas.
Yeah, so we throw two like volunteer appreciation events a year.
Okay,
So one in the summertime and one in Christmas, so that's probably where it's going.
okay, great. Thank you very much.
Any other questions on this? So what's next?
All right, so some things to look forward to. We have a really great media campaign in the works right now called Makers and Changemakers campaign. We have a videographer and a photographer going around town capturing stories of 12 people that are part of the creative economy or doing amazing things in town. and we're going to feature their stories starting in May. We'll have them on banners around town, and we'll also get it out on social media and through print and on our website. We will be supporting the Comfort Station, so our ACOA funding for the Comfort Station rolled into the next year. They were able to make an amendment. So KBC's role in that is really to help support some of the fixtures, so make sure that there's accessible signage, there's wayfinding, there's baby changing station, things like that. And then you will be seeing the Multicultural Festival making a revival this year. I met with the new and improved, well, not really improved. We had a wonderful committee before. We met with the new committee this month. I'm very excited about this committee, and we are hitting the ground running. We will be making it a bit later this year because one thing that they identified is that they would like the international students at NSCC to be there for it. So in the past, we've had it in August, and this year we're going to hold it September 9th. Okay, a big thank you to everyone for your support. I will say that it has been wonderful working with the town staff at Kentville. A huge shout out to Lindsay, who works very closely with KBC, but also we get a lot of support from Kirsten and Ashley, Rachel and Charlene, and others on the staff. So I just do want to say thank you to staff and thank you to council for supporting us each year.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any questions for either Genevieve or Paul? Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I think you're doing a fantastic job. And I especially loved the turf and the planting boxes in Center Square. I thought they were fantastic. So, thank you very much for all you do.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you. That was a great presentation. It was very thorough, so I really like that. And I love the 39% of your budget in 2022 were the COVID recovery grants. I know that was a huge help. But just to sort of echo what Councillor Maxwell said, I mean, when I look at, you know, the small little bit that you and Doug are being paid and the enormous work that you're doing within the town here, it's unbelievable. So thank you so much for all your efforts and for the board and all the volunteers that take part, because it truly is bringing Kentville to a whole new level. So thank you for that. Thanks.
Councillor Huntley.
Thank you. I see you're bringing a summer student in, and I'm wondering, have you ever had co-op students?
You know if we have in the past?
Not as long as I've been involved.
Okay, thank you.
I'd say the major limitation with that, Paula, is the hours when we only have a part-time and we have no office. But I'd be open to something like that.
Councillor Zalian.
Thank you, Mayor Snow. Thanks for your presentation. Always good to get information rolled out, and we appreciate all you guys do. Just wondering, is there any update on the Comfort Station? I know there were some hiccups last year. Anything in the works now?
I don't know how much I can reveal, but I am
Okay.
working closely with Lindsay on it.
Okay.
We did get an amendment from ACOA, so they will allow an extension until 2024 for the funding that KBC is receiving. I can't really say much for the Kentville side of it.
Okay. So the only thing that you guys get is the 20,000 basically to outfit it.
Yeah.
The finding the location is on the town and, okay. Thank you.
Is there anything further for either of our presenters? Nothing? Well, I want to say thank you very much for the work that you're doing. I was on an FCM, Federation of Canadian Municipalities Zoomcast a few weeks ago, and it was with regards to placemaking. And there was the person from Toronto, much like you are, but I think she's paid a heck of a lot more money. Just want to put that out there. And she was saying that you know that your events and the things that you're doing, particularly in placemaking, are successful when other people are copying them. And if you look at the Mural Festival, you know, it's been taken up by Berwick, it's been taken up in Windsor West Hants. So you really started something, and it's going great guns. And it's funny because the other day I was downstairs and there was this young man standing there, and he says, "Who do I talk to about painting?" And I was like, you want to paint our building? And it was, no, he says, I want to paint on a building. He said, who do I talk to about that? So then Ashley took him aside and gave him all the details. But that's the level of interest that we're seeing in the things that you're doing when somebody walks in on a cold day, and actually it was the end of January, and says, I want to paint on a building. And so thank you very much for all of those initiatives. They are changing the landscape of our downtown and making it a place to be. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And our next presenter is Paul Beasley with Assessment Services, so the Property Valuation Services. Paul, I think you got your...
Thank you, Your Worship. And let me see if I can find it here. I guess there's no mouse. Oh, yes, I see. Yeah, I'm not used to these newer versions.
We got fancy.
It's open at the bottom, if you go to the bottom, oh, I think you opened the KBC
Oh.
file.
At the bottom. Oh, yeah. Bifocals. Is that the one I need? Okay. Well, my 10 minutes is up. So
Paul, I haven't started the clock yet. No worries, no worries.
double click, but one. There
There
you
we
go.
go.
And it's left and right to scroll through your slides.
You can full screen that too, I think.
All right. Let's get it
Should have
up
a real
there.
mouse, shouldn't we?
Oops.
Try,
Full screen?
Yeah, gotta make it a little easier.
Get down there a little farther.
Yeah. left
All
and
right.
I think left and right should.
Okay, we'll see what happens there for sure. Once again, Your Worship, thank you for having me here, councilors as well, and Mr. CAO and staff. Pleasure to be here. It's been a long time since I've been in council chamber, but always fun to be here for sure. What I want to do today is give you a very quick walk through Assessment Services, Assessment 101, so to speak, and we'll do it. We'll talk about property assessment here in Nova Scotia, a quick review of your assessment role, a couple of the numbers, and we'll talk briefly about the capped assessment program. Yeah, it's kind of turned down. PVSC was created under the Property Valuation Service Corporation Act, early 2000s, and we're governed by the Nova Scotia Assessment Act. You have the Municipal Government Act, we have the Nova Scotia Assessment Act. We're municipally funded by all 49 of the municipal units around Nova Scotia. We're governed by a board of directors, of which we have, I believe, 10 directors right at the moment. The Deputy Mayor of Mahone Bay, Joe Feeney, is our chair this year. We have approximately 130 employees working remotely in 62 communities covering all the province. We have quite a few right here in the Kentful, Coldbrook area as well. What we do and what we don't do, we deliver the assessment roll to all 49 Nova Scotia municipalities by December the 1st each year. This year it was actually over 630 or over 640,000 assessment notices we sent out a few weeks ago. And we administer the capped assessment program and the seasonal tourist business designation program on behalf of the Nova Scotia government. What we don't do, we don't have the authority to set tax rates, to collect taxes, create tax policy, or provide tax relief. That's under your purview, under the legislature or the authority under the Municipal Government Act. But we do get a lot of questions about tax relief. How can you reduce my tax? We look at it, the assessment side only. If they have a question about taxes, we will typically refer them to the municipality to talk about their taxes. We assess, or under the Assessment Act, we're required to assess property at market value. There's a couple of components to this, but essentially the definition in the Act is the amount which, in the opinion of the assessor, would be paid if the property were sold on a date prescribed by the director in the open market by a willing buyer and a willing seller. So things such as tax sales, foreclosure sales, family sales, in most cases, those would not be considered a market value sale. We would not use them in our analysis at year end for determining market value. So what we do, we're actually a 1 year back, so we take all the sales in what we call the base year. For the 2023 roll, the base year is 2021, so keep in mind in that. So the calendar year 2021 is the base year of sales that we look at. Across the province, some 40,000 sales last year that we looked at in regards to setting the assessment roll in various municipalities. Also included with that market value is kind of part B, is the assessment also reflects the state of the property as it existed on the first day of December, immediately preceding the filing of the roll. So market value based on a year ago, add in any additional physical changes or adjustments right up to December 1st before the roll goes out, things such as building permits. We add those right up to December the 1st. So the important dates, I had mentioned the base year. The base date is actually January 1st of 2022, 1 year back. But we use all the sales in calendar year 2021 in order to look at what's happening in the market. And the state date is the characteristics rate up of the physical state of the properties up to and on December the 1st in 2022. This is for the 2023 roll. So that's what culminates in the 2023 roll. The delivery, or the notices were delivered on January the 9th this year. And in the legislation, there's a 31-day appeal period. Property owners have the right to appeal within 31 days of the date that the notice is mailed out. So the end of that 31 days was February 9th, just a few days ago. So what was happening in 2021? If you think back, this is what we were reading about, what we were hearing in the news and in the media. Soaring material costs, home prices remain high. This is the busiest year ever, prices up 18%. So that's what we were hearing. So this is kind of what happened. Our data scientists, when COVID first broke out in 2020, they decided we want to try to track historic sales trending and what would be anticipated, and we want to track that through the COVID period. So they went back to 2013. You'll see 2014 on the bottom, on the bottom axis of this graph. So the black line is the historic values through that period, and the red line is kind of the anticipated based on analysis of the historic numbers. So there's some seasonality up and down, but if you follow through 2016, 2018, they mirror each other pretty good, follow along quite naturally with each other. 2020, they start to diverge. That's when COVID started. You see the black dots, and they go sharply upward, to say the least. So what would have been expected is a continuance of the red line. That's a slight upward trend through 2022, 2021, 2022. But what we saw through the COVID period, through those couple of years, was the huge divergence and the black dots upward all the way into the middle of 2022, like summer of last year, and then it dropped off significantly. You've been reading in the news about how prices are now going down, that type of thing. But you see the orange goalposts that are going up. That's the market influence period. That's the base year for the 2023 roll. So you can see kind of, when you see some of the numbers, you'll understand that visually that's been up quite sharply. So here's the roll for the town of Kentville, 824 million of total assessed value. It's considered the market assessed value. You look to the left, the residential assessment. The market residential assessment, 660 million. However, once you take in the cap influence, the cap, as you recall, is to kind of put the brakes on the increases. So with the cap, you're at 577 million. The difference between those two may be what you would call the cap influence or the cap effect or the cap reduction or whatever you want to use for a term. The commercial assessment was 164 million. In the town, we looked at 65 permits last year, 240 property transactions, basically sales, and appeals, 62. But just to give you an idea of the numbers here, the lift for this year, which was the total residential at market, was up 24% almost, 23.67% for the town of Kentville year over year. That's market, based on, the upward black dots and everything else. With the cap, it was a 15% lift. So cap was at 7.7%. The market was up in the 20s. It brings them together. The cap was lower, it pulls down, it puts the brakes on. Commercial assessment was taxable commercial, which is very important in your budget deliberations and so on, was up 10% year over year. So compare that to 2022, residential with cap was up 10% versus the pretty much 15% for the 2023 roll. And commercial was up 4% the previous year and up close to 10% for this particular roll right now. So Kentville compared to other municipalities was higher than the provincial average. So the capped assessment program, it's provincial legislation that puts a cap on eligible property and limits the increases. The cap rate's based on Nova Scotia Consumer Price Index set by Stats Canada, and the province of Nova Scotia gets the number from Stats Canada, and they report it to us. They tell us in mid-November what the CPI rate's going to be, and that's what we use to put the lift on the cap or to calculate the cap for those people that are eligible for the cap. And it was 7.7% this year. You know that inflation's up a little bit over the past few years. In 2020, the cap percent CPI was 1%, 2021, 0.3%, 2022, when COVID first sort of hit, 5.4%, and this year 7.7%. The other interesting thing that I like to sort of point out is that before the pandemic came to the shores of the world, in 2020, Kentville had 56% of its residential improved properties on the cap or cap eligible. After the larger market increases the last couple of years, you're now up to 88% of your properties are eligible for the cap this year on this roll. So most of your residential owners have an eligible cap. So the eligibility for the cap is determined based on legislative criteria. Have to be a resident of Nova Scotia, at least 183 days a year. The property has to be at least 50% owned by a Nova Scotia resident. Can't be a business. It can't be an incorporated company or business. If a sale occurs, a family sale, it remains cap eligible, that sale or that property. It goes with the property. And it must be 3 units or less. So apartment buildings cannot be eligible for the cap if they have more than 3 units. So understanding the cap on the notice, I won't spend too much time on this, but the property owner gets the benefit of the lower of the two, the market value or their cap value. So if you see here the market value, what we deem to be the market value as of January 1st, plus any state date changes to the physical nature of the property is $416,800. Their cap, based on the cap calculation over the years, they're eligible, $372. What they're taxed on and what you as a town will be taxing them on would be the $372, the lower of the two. If they were not eligible for the cap, that capped assessment column would be blank. There's a footnote at the bottom of this shot that says that, but a lot of people don't read the footnotes. So if you're at the grocery store and they ask you about the cap, why I can't see a cap, I lost my cap, tell them to phone us. So that's where they can phone us. They can send us emails, phone us. The appeal period, or what we call the appeal period, is over. It was over on February the 9th at midnight. We received a lot of calls, a lot of inquiries, a lot of appeals this year, up quite considerably, but you can appreciate it if someone gets their assessment notice and it's up 7.7%. That's not something that they'd normally see, so we did get a lot of inquiries this year, and we'll start working on those right away. So, Your Worship, if there's any questions, I'll be glad to answer them, and I know if you wish to have a more in-depth session at some point in the future, be glad to do it.
Excellent. Thank you so very much, Paul. Deputy Mayor.
Oops, sorry. Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Paul. That's a really, really good presentation, and I really appreciate it. It's very in-depth, and I find it super, super interesting. The appeals in 2022, the 62, and then could morph into the next question, but are a lot of those appeals successful? And I know you said you had an influx of them for this year. Are you expecting those to be successful, and why would people think that their assessed value is too high?
I think it's getting harder and harder for people, to make ends meet.
Yeah.
And so if they see it going up 7.7%, which is, even that is gonna prompt them to inquire. Would they be successful if they said that, the cap 7.7%, I can't, what am I supposed to do? The cap is legislated.
Right.
It's not appealable. They might say, my value's too high, and we might walk them through, okay, let's talk about the characteristics of your property. Do you have the finished basement, do you not? And if they say, if the characteristics aren't correct, we'll make an adjustment. We want to make sure we get the data correct, so we encourage people to call.
Okay.
There's 3 levels of appeal, or a sort of review, which is the initial assessor review. So every time we get an appeal or an inquiry, we'll put them through to an assessor if they want to know about assessment value. So it will go all, we had our assessors on the phone all through the appeal period. So an assessor will review that first appeal initially, and that assessor will make a decision. He'll either recommend that the appeal be confirmed, so the value is good, we think the value is good, or they'll make an amended assessment, and in either case, we'll send a notice to them saying that this is your confirmed amount, or this is your amended amount. The other thing is property owner can withdraw, and I think a lot will be withdrawn once they understand that the cap is the cap, because we do get a lot of inquiries about that. Typically, across the province, we're talking 25 to 30% that appeal that we'd get in that is typically adjusted.
Okay.
But the majority are either withdrawn or confirmed. Okay. Now, they can continue on to the second level, to the Nova Scotia Appeal Tribunal, where that's a chairperson, and then the property owner or the appellant gets to say their bit and say why they feel the assessment is incorrect or inaccurate or whatever, and then the director of assessment or one of our assessors will go and state what the assessment services believes to be the case as far as the value. But it sounds kind of daunting, but the Nova Scotia Assessment Appeal Tribunal is basically just a professional that is used to dealing in mediation, or they may have been a lawyer, a retired lawyer, or a current lawyer or something, and they'll just hear the two parties, at a table like this, and they'll just sit, and a lot of it's virtual now, so they can do it virtually as well. So, and then finally, if the property owner is still not satisfied, they could take it to the UARB, or the director of assessment could take it to the UARB if we don't agree with the decision. And I hope I answered your question.
Yes.
I went kind of in different tangents there.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you. Very, very helpful.
Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Paul. Question about permits in that. What's the correlation between, let's say this year Kentville has $20 million in building permits, and when that gets sent off to property valuation, is it a dollar for dollar, right? You've said you've got 20 million in permits, or does it still based on the data that you guys have with new builds or build-ons or renovations or that type of thing?
It's more to do with what you said there at the end or whatever. It's not dollar for dollar. As you can appreciate, you know, a lot of times it's more than dollar for what the permit value is, because someone comes in and says, I'm gonna build a garage for $10,000. I'm gonna build it myself or whatever. Well, that's a $30,000 garage. You know, so anyways, but you know, the other way is too, is sometimes there's, they build it differently than what, you know, maybe they took it a permit, but they didn't finish the basement on a new house or something like that, or they changed what they're doing, or the quality grade, and there's a lot of factors that go into it, but you'll recall in that market values definition, it's in the opinion of the assessor. So the assessors are used to seeing this and going out and determining the value, and we put it on our system of, you know, a garage of that quality, that size is mass appraisal, garage value that we have it on there for is this amount. So, you know, it's not gonna be dollar for dollar.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions for Paul? None? All right, well, Paul, thank you so very much, and again, open invitation to come back and chat a little bit more about this. The presentation at NSFM in November was excellent, and you know, we really got to see the data, and particularly the data behind this graph. So I do put that invitation to you to come back and do that presentation for the members of council.
Well, I'll say that the 2022 data, you saw it going up and then coming back down. We are just starting to review that. So I can't speculate or forecast or anything, but it will probably be an interesting review, just the fact that it was up and down or whatever. So it'd be interesting to see where it comes. So I'd be glad to come back and next year at this time, show you another diagram or another chart like that or whatever. So
Perfect.
anyways, been a pleasure. Thank you very
Excellent.
much. Have a great evening.
Thank you so much. Have a good trip home.
Bye.
All right, next is our department reports and recommendations. The directors have provided their reports for council review and will provide an update and receive questions from council. The reports will be presented and are part of the record of this meeting. Only items of new business arising from the reports will be taken for motions. And CEO Tro, could you introduce our department reports?
Sure. So thank you, Mayor Snow. So we'll be starting off tonight with finance, and I'd be happy to provide some commentary on that.
All right.
Town of Kentville staff report, as well as the forecast report, is in the package for tonight. Revenues are exceeding the benchmark at 92.3%, but so are the expenditures exceeding the benchmark at 87.2%. So really, the detail in this, what I would like to do is touch on the projection report. So the projection report for Kentville, we're in a surplus situation at 28,400. Of course, as I mentioned at the last meeting, Director Bell will tell you that his budget is heavily influenced by the amount of white stuff that comes down or lack thereof. So it's the biggest piece as we go through the last 6 or 7 weeks of the year. And of course, that correlates to things like fuel and maintenance and repair of all the vehicles as well. So right now, on the expenditure side, just want to point to a couple of things. The insurances, folks, have been reported in multiple previous sessions, is up $7,000 this year. And so we also have a number of equipment and building expenses that were up. Our legal and audit expenses are up. We have engaged our auditor to assist us with a restatement of some of our financial statements. And what that means is in the last year's audit, there were a number of recommendations on displaying our financials that some are requirements and some are things that the auditor suggests that we do. So the auditor is going to be working with our staff to actually go through that. So that's actually going to increase our audit bill at the end of the year a bit, but it also means that we're setting ourselves up for exactly what the auditors are looking to see in the coming years. The other piece is that revenues for the end of the year are expected to be up by the end of the year by 100,000. A couple of things, obviously, with interest rates up, we are seeing positive interest on any cash that we would have on hand. We also have a number of revenues that would come in, which are tax in lieu. We still anticipate coming from the province, so things we would see around economic development and so on. So there's a few of those that are outstanding. We anticipated we would be probably seeing most of those around the middle of March, which from a timing perspective. But those are kind of the highlights I think I'll hit at this point.
Excellent. Thank you very much, CAO Troke and Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. May I direct through you?
Sure, please.
CEO Troke, I think you said that the projected surplus is did you say 28.4?
Yeah.
And you're suspecting it will be a smidge higher because of the savings with not as much snow removal?
Yeah, there's two things there. There is, that is the snow removal piece. And also right now, there's a number of things right now, we have them projected as full value to the end of the year.
Okay.
So again, some of those other things besides snow, fuel, maintenance on vehicles and all those come in. So this right now where we have those kind of projected at maximum, assuming, to your point, then we should see some upside on that as we get towards the end of the year.
That's great, thank you.
Councillor York.
Thank you. Through the chair, if I might.
Please.
CAO, you mentioned that there might be some changes in how we show our numbers. Is there also the ability, kind of thinking critically with an accessibility lens, to make our budget and our numbers more accessible to everybody? So that not just in terms of finding the numbers, but in terms of being able to understand what's being presented? Because I, in my third year of budgeting here and having worked here before and kind of aware of budgets, still find it complicated.
So thank you, great. I mean, this, I would agree, it's part of when we do present our capital budget, we'd be doing it a little bit more and trying to present it kind of at a high level in one place for folks to be able to see it and then having an ability to drop down into some more detail. Operationally, because there are so many pieces, it's not as easy to do on that side. But the ability to roll numbers up, at least in a presentation piece, I think is really valuable. And more of the restatement stuff with the auditors is hinging upon just public sector accounting body requirements. And but then there's also a few things that they just recommended from a perspective of being able to get information. And I don't have the details on that. This is more kind of working paper stuff. So as we go through those, certainly all that information, the restatement would come back as information for council to be able to see.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Zabian.
Thank you, through the chair. CAO, just so I understand that, you're saying that the auditor is recommending that we reissue some information so it'll be a little more transparent for the public too, is that?
It's not transparency, it's more about each year public sector accounting rules get updated. And normally what would happen is the accounting standards folks would be talking to those who are in accounting and auditing and saying, this is where we're going. So they would have a hands up and saying, things should be reported this way or information needs to be accounted for. So something as simple as if they're gonna change the way you depreciated a building or the way that, so let's just say you're trucking along and you're depreciating a building like at each year it goes 5%. If they change that to 10, you just want to be able to make sure that you're representing that so a reader, when they see that blip, would understand why that's happening.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any further questions for CAO on financials? All right, moving right along to our planning and development.
So, get my next pile. So under planning and development, we have, first I want to thank Kirsten. She's doing a great job in all the requests that are coming in. We're still having lots of activity. 5 permits were issued in the month of January for a total of just shy of $500,000. We have 1 subdivision application that's been sent for registration. Just as a quick update on a couple of projects, because I know folks who would have been here in Vita Living, they're doing some clearing on their site up in Heartland Court. So the applicant is aware of the responsibility to ensure stormwater does not impact neighboring properties. McDougall Heights, continuing with dialogue with the proponent, but also there's some information, particularly from an engineering perspective, that we're waiting back before we can move that forward. Encore staff are waiting for the developer to submit a revised site plan. And then, of course, all of the property owners within 30 meters would receive information on that. And the municipal floodline mapping project moves ahead as expected, with anticipated that it will be wrapped up in March of 2023.
Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Worship. In the Vita Living CAO, you mentioned about the stormwater. How do we regulate that? Do we send an engineer up at stages to make sure whatever engineering they've come up with that needs to be done gets done? Or is this sort of the honor system where? Thank you.
It starts at the design phase, of course, and we will only approve subdivision once, it demonstrates that it has the sort of the net zero effect on downstream properties. So they have to manage their stormwater on site. All subdivisions do now. So they, we don't necessarily inspect it as it's being installed, but certainly before it's signed off on and permits are issued, we have to be satisfied that it's been built to the design of their, done by their engineer, if that answers your question.
Yep. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. If I could, through you, to the CAO. With respect to the McDougall Heights rezoning, I have had not a lot, just probably 2 or 3 different folks that have reached out to me. And I think it might be helpful to sort of know, moving forward, what they can expect. I know a package will be coming out to us, but maybe can you take us through that just a little bit? Just so people have a bit more knowledge and a comfort level about sort of how the process will go. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for the question. So where we are right now is there was some engineering work with regards to sewer capacity was requested. So there is a report being done by the proponent's engineering. And so we're waiting for that to come back. So that allows us to answer any questions we would have with regards to capacity or phasing. And so that's basically one of those pieces that we're waiting on. Once that happens, the package that we'll put together that would come for council would be all of the different pieces. I like to call it the chapters of the book. So then you'd be able to kind of take a look at, here's what the revised drawings and plan would be from the proponent, traffic study, you'd have your engineering piece around sewer, stormwater, and then ultimately at the end of the day, anything that would be coming from staff with regards to recommendations and so on. That, of course, then would lead to the opportunity for the public information session. So that report would be available, have the public information session, and then council would have the opportunity, obviously, to do their full review with regards to that reading of or hearing of the rezoning application.
Okay, great, thank you.
Are there any further questions for the CEO with regards to planning? All right, moving on to community and economic development.
So with economic development, just a couple of things. So Lindsay's been very actively involved in our ongoing work that we've been doing internally with regards to capital and operational budgets for 23-24. The tourism marketing content for 23-24 is being planned with the Canada Cup and other special events coming up. And the events committee has rolled out the promo for Fire and Ice, and the Multicultural Festival, as you've heard, is back. And so a lot of work going into that. Beautification for the winter. Right now, there's not a lot of specific things that are happening, but there's an extensive amount of planning, and thus the emphasis with regards to the work that they're doing with regards to budget to make sure that we've got everything in place as the warmer weather arrives, but also, already planning for what would Fire and Ice and those look like for next year. It's for anything that you might need ahead of time. So that's it.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any questions for the CEO with regards to this report? Yeah, you got off easy that time. All right, moving right along to Parks and Recreation, Director Bedingfield.
Good evening, Council. You have my report. I just wanted to touch on a few things. The first one is that our Homeless No More committee presented its final data, and I had brought like kind of a little bit of a preamble here with you to give a bit of a teaser. So the full package was presented to stakeholders, I don't know, weeks ago? I don't even know. Before I had to submit this report, which was a really great way to kind of come back to the folks that helped us collect the data and fulfill our duties, certainly through ethics, but also just in general, just being a decent organization, just trying to make sure that they know that we haven't forgotten them. So we have asked that this council receive the full presentation at next month's CAC. So Alicia will be here and you can ask her lots of questions. They're still paring into the details of the data. So next month we'll have even more that we haven't heard of yet, including those like individual stories that kind of help paint the picture of what's going on. Regardless, and even as they kind of figure out if there's any duplications, it's still very clear that Kentville has the highest amount of people who are experiencing homelessness or who are precariously housed by far. So on that note, we also opened our first emergency warming center, and this is something a little bit different than the warming center that we've been talking about. This one was an emergency center, which is important to note that we had it open for 24 hours for the sheer fact that a polar vortex doesn't come very often, but it does mean that if you are outside, the chances of you not surviving are quite high. So as much as possible, the volunteers promoted that we had a shelter open in the area with Open Arms. Open Arms also opened an additional shelter in Berwick, and they're actually looking at that on a more permanent basis, which is really great, so there's more beds. But sometimes there are people who just don't meet the requirements to be able to stay at the shelter, and so those folks also require a place just to stay warm during something like a polar vortex. And so that was the warming center, the emergency warming center. It was put together in partnership with Valley Connect Outreach, which is an organization that runs our soup kitchen here. They had more volunteers than they could handle, I'm happy to say, and actually had to turn people away at the door because there were so many people in our community that wanted to help out. And then the final piece on that, and there was an attachment to the report this month around collecting some of the Spike Fund data. So you would have seen that infographic that Ashley created. And she did a really good job of putting it, kind of painting the picture about how things have changed. Really, the story is that the request for the Spike Fund, which is a fund that supports folks who want to experience and participate in recreation opportunities, be it equipment or programming fees or whatever that is, has more than tripled. And that's just in the past year, and this year isn't even completed yet. So I just wanted that to be noted. I will also say that we have had also a record number of donations to the Spike Fund this year. So it does go both ways, but we are forever grateful for people who make a donation, and we are forever in need of folks to donate to the Spike Fund. Community outreach and events. Lindsay had talked a little bit about the Canada Cup. That is ramping up in terms of planning. It's really important that people kind of understand the grasp of what's the breadth and the size of what's going to happen this summer. We're used to hosting a national event. This is actually nationals. So riders from across the country will come here to get points to, in this case, it's going to be to get their, finalize their carding from the federal government. So what that means is that if you're a certain ranking, then Sport Canada will fund you to continue your training for next year's nationals, at which point we're going to be hosting them again in 2024. And that's kind of the last ditch effort to be able to qualify for the Olympics. So we will be a big stage this summer, and we'll be an even bigger stage next year. So Cycling Canada kind of helped us figure out what does that mean from an economic impact perspective, and they did look at a similar sized community and a national event that happened in a town this far out from the major city out in BC, and the total economic impact that they had calculated from that event was $863,000 to the local community. So we're quite excited. I do want to note that that also included hotel costs. And where we don't have a massive amount of hotels in this area, that number will be skewed, but let's hope that that means that there will be some in the future. A few things under the council-related section. One is that our accessibility committee meeting had to be canceled this past month just because both the chair and co-chair were unable to attend. But our meeting that's going to be held next month is a training that is going to be offered around anti-racism, and that is open to all members of council and all members of staff. And there you will be receiving details. Jen will send something out there, and I encourage everybody to take advantage of it. And then the last little piece around the regional recreation complex, it says here in my report, which was true when I submitted it, that there will be a plan to bring the final presentation to council, or the kind of where we're at right now to council. But the committee just met, and that's going to be actually a joint committee meeting. You may already know about that, but just to clarify that in my report. And that's it.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Director Bedingfield. Are there any questions for the director on this report? Councillor Maxwell.
Well, thank you. Director Bedingfield, I sent an email out from one of our residents up in Deerhaven concerning the green space up there, and I sent it all to all of council, the mayor, and CAO. So CAO, feel free to jump in here. When I get an email from a resident that is full of frustration and asking me, you know, what can I do? I want to have good information to give them. And so basically what the resident was saying, or what I understood her to be saying, was this is Town of Kentville green space, and she was willing to mow and trim and make a path through there to join up with another trail. And the people up there like to walk on this. And that there is some dispute with some of the other, two other residents about this green space. And so in my first term, it was if a person was willing to put in the sweat equity to do the project, that we usually worked with them. And so I was wondering if you could just explain or tell me kind of what's going on there, and why this person might be feeling frustrated.
So me? Yes, go ahead. Yeah, thanks for that question. So just to back up a little bit, we call them the pocket parks, or the community parks around Kentville. Our priority goes to just what you're talking about, that trail connectivity as it's linked with our active transportation plan. Right. So absolutely making sure that people are able to navigate through the community using active transportation is quite key. So a trail is what they're speaking of is exactly aligned with our priorities. The other piece when we're talking about developing green space, especially green space in community, is that under no circumstance do we want to start a neighborhood war over a piece of grass, essentially, that is in people's backyards. Those spaces have so much meaning to the community. They're a gathering place. They're a place for people to connect, and also we're talking about a way to connect different neighborhoods. So the way that we move forward on green space development is just as important as the outcome. So regardless of how many people are for it or against it, it is the role of our department and staff within our department to work with that community to make sure everything is comfortable. So in this case, that means that we need to do we need to make sure that we're actually talking about the same piece of land. There's some discussion about what's town property and what's private property. So you'll see that coming up in the capital budget, that there's money there to do survey.
Survey says.
That's what the survey says, to do a survey. And then the other piece is that our staff have been working quite closely with that community to say that we want to make sure that we hear from everybody's input. The question is not whether or not we do something, because it's town property and town gets to decide how to do it, or whether or not they're going to do something. The question is how we want to do that. Also, having community want to come on board and support that is just really awesome, and I don't ever want to discourage that. We want to make sure that we move forward in a right way that's safe, that's hearing everybody, and that again doesn't create divide within community. So we do have staff working with that individual, and you will see that coming up in this year's capital budget.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, and I'm just wondering if we can send an email out or a letter out to try and explain that a little bit better than perhaps it has been explained to this resident, and just so that they are clear on that the town isn't turning their back on this thing, that this is something that is in the next budget, and we're probably going to move forward on it.
I will make sure that we make contact.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. Thanks, Rachel. Just a couple of things. When you talk about Homeless No More, Russ Sanchez spoke at a Rotary meeting 2 weeks ago, and we talked a little bit about the Community Crisis Navigator, and he said that that role is so important in this community, and it's making a massive, massive difference. So I know you probably already know that, but it just was something coming from him, and he said.
With Ashley?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it has. Well, I mean, we saw the data when she presented it here.
Yeah.
It's just phenomenal.
Yeah,
We're
absolutely.
really,
Yeah, so he said that's great, so I just wanted to pass that along. And with respect to Spike, I know that we do, when people contribute, we do issue a tax receipt for people. And do we kind of have an idea as to how much we'd like to collect for the 2023 year? How much do you think we would need?
Well, it's really hard because this year's been really high.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can look into that and check out the numbers.
Okay.
And I can bring that number back.
yeah, and it
is-
doesn't necessarily
yeah.
have to be brought back. It could just maybe be put out on the website or something like that, just to put it forward to people. And if people are in a position that they can contribute to it, great. And if they're not, that's great too, but it just gives people the option. to
Yeah,
know.
and there are, one of the things that we've learned, especially with, obviously I'm a little bit biased, but with Kenfall, is that this is a community filled with people that want to give, and they want to better understand how they can support, whether that's donating their time or donating their money or
Right.
bringing in a piece of equipment for the play boxes, whatever that is. And so much of it is just letting folks know how they can support the people in their community that may have a few more needs at the moment. And so, yeah, absolutely, that's a big piece. I can say that whenever we've come close to drying up the Spike Fund, we've put out a call or we've held an event and asked for donations, and people always come through, and it's just really lovely. And I guess I would want to thank everybody for the support that we're getting. Ashley's doing a good job actually of collecting testimonials in those, because I think those stories are really
Absolutely.
important. We have everything from people who they didn't have the right boots to be able to walk the trails, and that was really important to them, but they also were able to then go to their medical appointments because their feet were no longer cold to be able to, so they were starting to make their appointments. It's
Okay.
people who, wanted to access some of our programs. It's just really great things. The other side of it too is that when people contact our department, Ashley specifically, then she's actually able to check in on them. How are you doing? Do you need anything else? We can,
Okay.
help you navigate here. Did you know that there's a soup kitchen?
Okay.
Sometimes we go to the soup kitchen and sit down with people and help them fill out. It's another tool that we use to engage with our community and get to know them a bit better.
Yeah, thank you very much, thank you.
Is there anything else for the director? All right, thank you very much. Next, we have police report. Commission Chair York, did you wish to speak to this report? You're on.
Thank you. Some of you are aware that the chief is away on holiday. So we actually haven't had our February meeting to go over these numbers yet, so that won't be happening until the end of the month. But I can tell you that everything looks about status quo from month over month. There aren't any major surprises that I've seen. Again, I haven't met with the chief since receiving this report to go over sort of the increase in like the criminal code charges and those sorts of things, so I don't know what that would relate to, and I wouldn't want to speak to something that I don't actually know the answer to.
All right, very good. Question from Councillor Maxwell.
Yes, thank you through the chair. You hear things out in the community, and I wanted to ask the chief how we were getting along with our complement of officers, and are we on full staffing? And I know that the RCMP are heavily recruiting, and I know that our officers are excellent, and have we heard anything about any of our officers looking at moving to the RCMP? Thank you.
CEO.
I was just gonna say, I know the chief had one term position that he had posted for. It was a very short term, and it was basically backfilling someone who was off for a short period of time. And so I know because of the short-term nature, he didn't get a lot of responses for that. But I also know he hasn't had an opportunity to update the board with that. I understand within policing, kind of all around the board, the conversation that you've talked about, the RCMP recruiting is everywhere.
Yes, I know.
They're, and this is just me anecdotally saying I'm hearing the same stuff. But I do not know, and I don't know that the chief, even in a public forum, would be able to talk about it unless he had somebody who approached him and said, we thought we were going to have somebody who was going to go. So I do know that as of right now, we have one position that's a term that he was looking to fill, and it was very short-term in nature, so it was very difficult to get somebody that short of a period of time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving right along to Engineering and Public Works, Director Bell.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. I'll start with Water Commission, as I do every month. In December, we completed an extensive sampling program required by Nova Scotia Environment every 5 years, following the guidelines for Canadian drinking water quality. From each of our 7 wells, the raw water, and our 2 primary storage tanks, the treated water. We received the results in mid-January, and everything is well within their strict guidelines. In January, we had a couple of water breaks, which is typical during the winter months, even though this hasn't been a typical winter. But otherwise, the month of January was operationally uneventful for the Water Commission, with a few new residential service connections. Similarly, the sanitary sewer service was operationally, there were no issues within the sanitary sewer service. Under Public Works, the month of January was not typical weather-wise, as we all know. While this has helped with the snow and ice control budget, and we are forecasting a surplus right now in that line of the operating budget, the unfrozen ground and several major rainfall events, particularly in January, has been damaging to our roads. In particular, a section of Canaan Avenue has been closed for over 2 weeks now, between Dale Street at the bottom and the upper street, Elm Avenue, due to a slope failure. The slope has taken out the sidewalk in that area. The road is still intact to the curb line, but we've barricaded the street off just for safety reasons, because the guardrail is also gone with the sidewalk, and we don't know the full extent of the street situation. So I actually met just a couple hours ago with a consultant and a geotech firm out of the city just for a preliminary investigation. They're going to be booking a drill rig to do some test drills both in the street and at the edge of the bank, which will help us with a recommendation. So we know right now that the required amount could be in the order of $200,000 to repair that street. So we'll look for funding, through Mayor Snow mentioned that NSFM has some funding opportunities out now for relief from damage. We believe this to be a result of the weather related, but we'll know better once we get that work done, the preliminary drilling. And we talk about it more on our capital budget meetings once we have a little better handle on the extent of the damage and the recommended repair. Under Traffic Authority, nothing to report this month. And under projects, the preliminary field work and design is now underway on some upcoming capital projects that we will be discussing in capital budget meetings later this month. And that is my brief report.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you very much, Director Bell. And a question from Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. Not a question. I noticed the guardrail along Park Street and across from the school, and how nice it looks. I think that looks fantastic, and I just wanted to thank you for getting that up and everything.
That was just last week, I believe, that
Yeah, I just noticed it
company
the
was
other
up.
day,
Yeah,
so.
turned out very nice.
I must have been going slow enough to notice, but anyway, it looked good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, you.
Good thing the chief's not here. All right, are there any further questions for Director Bell? None? All right, Director, thank you very much.
Thank you.
CAO, your turn.
Thank you, Mayor Snow. So as you've heard in all of the reports, budgets, and some moving numbers. So as Director Bell outlined, trying on a few things to narrow this down to give council the best picture of what we expect to see for some work that's going to be done obviously early in the next year. Included in that piece, one of the things that we're doing a little bit different is here at Senior Advisory Committee, so the folks who sit around this table typically on Tuesday morning, we continue to grow our numbers to include more younger staff into the process, folks who have not been in positions where they get the opportunity to have not just the direct feedback, but also to be more involved in the budget process. So we're taking this opportunity for everybody to get up to speed on who's on first and he's on second, but also for folks who have not been in a budgeting process before, for them to learn how a budgeting process would work. And so lots of good feedback, lots of questions, which is great. And this is all obviously connected to our succession management over time to make sure that we have folks not just exposed to it, but understanding in each one of the departments why we do what we do and where the numbers come from. So that process is transpiring along as I'd hoped. Also, we completed our second round of interviews for the Director of Finance position, so we'll be moving forward with a recommendation and with basically reference checks in the next day or two, so we're getting close. You heard Director Bedingfield talk about the rec center and the emergency warming. One of the key things here is that we are not, and it is not, the rec center is not a shelter. This is something that we were open and in a 24-hour capacity because an emergency situation. And we did have one or two individuals who were here overnight, not sleeping, but connecting with volunteers and doing different things. And so we made sure that we weren't going to find anybody who was out on the street. And you know, you do your best in these circumstances, but you can't predict for everything that's going to happen. For the shelter operators out there and the way that they work collectively together, I must say, really super dedicated people, and I really appreciate the hard work. We had lots of feedback, obviously, from our shelter here in town, but also from those connected in other communities. And, you know, but the work that you saw here, we had a vast number of people who wanted to show up, volunteer, be connected, make donations. And so the one thing you can say is the folks here in the town of Kentville really care and don't want to see anybody ever get into harm's way. So I just want to say and commend all those folks who came forward and did volunteer or want to volunteer. That it was great to be in an environment where so many people care about the people in their community. So that's all I'm going to say tonight.
All right, thank you very much. Do any questions for the CAO? Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. CAO, I think it's great that the young staff are doing the, budget work and getting more involved. I'm wondering, is there a reason why some of our younger staff who have taken on the responsibility of writing up reports to be presented at council, why they can't come in and present those reports themselves and gain some experience rather than CAO having to do all those reports? Of course, CAO could help with the answers if we have questions, but it would be nice for us and probably for the public to see some of the people who are actually putting up the reports. Thank you.
So first, a great idea. We've had those conversations. I think some of it, as we've had discussions as we go through this budget process, kind of how we align ourselves will look a little bit differently in the coming months. And also some of it is folks are, as they're getting their feet under them, want to be in a place where they're ready to stand at the podium and be able to do that. So I think you will see more folks in the coming months, and I think it's a great idea.
Thank you.
Councillor Sabian.
Thank you. CAO, I'm going to ask you a question that I asked you a couple of weeks ago. When I read the MGA and I read our policies with the town of Kentville, council is to establish committees. And I noticed again today, there's an advertisement for a planning committee. And I know none of us here, not with me present anyway, voted to establish this committee. So I'm wondering again why there's an advertisement for people to join a committee and be part of it when council hasn't voted on it?
Well, Councillor, in NCAC, a number of months ago, I guess it was, that there was discussion around this committee. And basically, I understood from the direction I had from council was to post an ad to get a list of names so that if council's heading down that road, we'd be in a position to move forward. So that's why the ad is out there.
Thank you for that. It was at CAC on January 9th, so about a month and a half ago, or a month ago rather, it was, yeah, just on January 9th. I look at the policy and we're supposed to establish these committees, so and that's when I struggle here and I wonder why we have a council sometimes, because if everything is just being done by one person or two people, I mean, is there a reason to have council? I mean, it is a policy, and I think, you know, if that's what the will of council is, then perhaps it should come back at council at the end of the month just to form it and vote on it, and rather than jump the ship, because you've got a situation now where you didn't call, it's not a call for interest, it's a definite, be part of this committee, it's, you know.
Can I call for an order?
Certainly, thank you, Councillor. So.
Sorry, Mayor Snow, just one quick thing.
No,
When you
a
call
point
a
of-
point of order, you have to explain why.
She's calling a point of order on
But
you.
can she speak herself? That's what it says in Robert's rules. When you call a point of order, you need to explain why. You just can't throw the word out, point of order, without an explanation.
Thank you, Councillor
Yeah.
Zabian, for that lesson on Robert's rules. Councillor Huntley, you wish to
welcome.
speak.
Thank you. When I call the point of order, that topic that we're talking about right now, first of all, is not on the agenda. I would like to be able to stick to the agenda, and if there's something that we need to discuss, maybe beforehand, before the agenda comes out, could it be actually there? That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Huntley, and you are correct if it's not on the agenda. However, I will say from the perspective of Councillor Zabian, it is in the minutes that we were provided with. 7B, under new business, the request for decision planning committee. Councillor Craig Gerard described the coming growth of the town that needed for a committee to help guide the town and land use bylaws. Staff will start the process of building membership for this committee. Council has some concerns about establishing a planning committee before a director of planning is hired. So all of that is in our minutes, so therefore that is the reason why this is going ahead. And as you will recall, when this RFD came before council, I looked to you and asked for consensus, and consensus was given because no one said no. There were concerns raised, however, there was no. So that, it's in our minutes, and therefore that is what staff is using, our CAO, to proceed with this matter. Councillor Zabian, or Councillor Maxwell.
Oh, thank you. On this matter, I thought that it would be okay because it was in the minutes, and plus it's something that was discussed earlier. My recollection of that meeting is quite different, and I could be wrong, but Councillor Gerard did speak to that. I spoke to that. Councillor Zabian spoke to that, and nobody else spoke to that. And so how we could get consensus from only 3 speakers, 2 which were hesitant, and 1 which was for it, I don't understand how that happened. And I do believe that the mayor did say, just turn to the CAO and say, I think you can proceed here. And that's the way that I recall it, because I was quite surprised that we were doing that. And so, to be totally honest, that's my recollection. And, you know, I have to agree, I was a bit surprised that we just went ahead and gave you, Mayor Snow, just went ahead and gave CAO the marching orders, and we hadn't had a wholesome discussion with everyone on council. Of course, it can be done your way, but that's my recollection, so I didn't want it to seem as if Councillor Zabian was totally out of line here. So I just wanted to say how I recall it.
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell, and your recollection is exactly as it is on the video and as I recall. However, when you go back and look at that, at the 1 minute 37 second point, you will find that, or 1 hour, sorry, 1 hour 37 minutes, you will find that the first thing I did was call for consensus. And you will recall from our training that unless you state that you are not in agreement with consensus, consensus occurs. And then people were provided with their opportunity to speak. And yes, you did give reasons why you thought that this was not the best idea at this point in time. However, you did not say, I don't provide my consensus when you spoke. So by not speaking when I called for consensus, you gave consensus. Councillor Huntley?
Just for myself, if I spoke out of turn, I would like to apologize to Councillor Vivian.
Councillor, you did
And-
not speak out of turn.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions, Councillor Zabian?
Thank you, Mayor Snow. I have to agree with what Councillor Maxwell said. That's my recollection, just for the record. And could we, and this should be a discussion that we haven't had about our meeting policies, which we were gonna have, I believe, last winter, but could we go back to how minutes used to be recorded when it says in the minute, Councillor Maxwell said this or requested this? Now those minutes are very evasive now. There's no mention of who said what or who brought what forward. It just says there are concerns. It doesn't, you can't really go by the minutes anymore. You have to go back and watch the meeting if you really want to know what happened or who said what. I don't know when that changed, if it's been a while, but I remember minutes used to be very explicit and they would say Councillor Gerard mentioned or brought forward or was concerned about. And now they're very, you really have to go back and sit for 2 hours and watch the whole meeting to get a full purview of what happened or what was said. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zabian, and I understand what you're saying because I was actually watching the wrong meeting the first time and couldn't figure out why I wasn't getting to the spot. However, having said that, minutes should reflect decisions that we've taken, and the conversations that we have are not what go into minutes. And we were being provided, I'll say, with the service of discussion points. However, we've gone to the way that they're stated that they should be done is that they reflect the decisions that we have taken.
Thank you. And I guess I'll go back. I'll own this because I really should go back and see when that was changed. But I guess that would be another thing too. These little changes that happen, they just seem to happen, and there's no conversation around council how we want things to happen here. And I mean, I'll go back and find out when that happened, and I'm gonna take blame for not looking that up myself because I should have sat down and reviewed them. But it's little things like that kind of throw you for a curve because I don't remember ever having that conversation here when we were gonna change minutes. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, CAO, there's an extra CAC meeting planned for the 21st of February. Do we have a topic for that meeting?
Mayor Snow, at this moment, we were hoping to have all of our capital budget information together to do a walkthrough with council for that. We're still not 100% sure, so I'll definitely, by end of day tomorrow, let council know if that is needed. Otherwise, if council has anything that they would like to hold that for, I guess like we did last month, please notify me and we let folks know whether we can release that date or not.
All right, thank you very much, CAO. So we'll expect to hear from you by end of day tomorrow. Council, if you have a topic that you would like to see on the agenda, and it would be a single working meeting, it will be open to the public. However, we will not live stream, but the public may join us here. Please have something to the CAO by the close of business on Wednesday, the 15th of February. So if you have a topic, email to the CAO on the 15th of Feb. Yeah, no, Tuesday's tomorrow. That's the CAO will give us his.
No, I meant Tuesday is the 21st.
Yes, because the 20th is Family Day or Heritage Day, so there's no business that day, so the meeting is shifted to the Tuesday, the 21st. Deputy Mayor.
sorry, and that would be at 4 or 4:30 if, sorry, if we had it.
For Emily.
Would be 4. I may have something to bring forward, but, so by end of business today.
No, by end of
Sorry.
business, by end of business on Wednesday for anything
what I
from
meant to
council.
say.
However, the CAO will let us know by end of business tomorrow if we're doing capital budget. And
So-
again, those meetings are open to the public, but we will not be live streaming them. So the public may join us here in council chambers at 4. Good? All right, staff reports have been presented and are part of the record of this meeting. Staff, thank you very much for being here this evening. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
We have no unfinished business, or any unfinished business we have is still in the hopper with legal. We have no correspondence this evening, and we have no new business again in the hopper. And that brings us to public comments. Members of the public are invited to speak to council on matters that is currently before council. Please provide your name and address, and you will have 3 minutes to speak.
Good evening, Your Worship, councillors, members of citizens of Kentville. I'm Sharon Keogh. I live at 29 Alicia Boulevard, and I'm a citizen and I'm a taxpayer. I'm still struggling, reconciling council's huge concern with the Robinson property delays in meeting the first of milestones during the height of a pandemic and the KCA properties contract. And I do recognize that the KCA properties, or the Encore contract, is huge, huge complex. But nonetheless, Encore purchased the KCA properties in June of 2018. They were to have 15% of it finished of the entire project, 16 units, totally completed by June of 2020. And yet, by June of 2020, there wasn't a shovel in the ground. Their plans were still at the conceptual level. There were 0 permits applied for and 0 permits approved. In March of 2020, 3 months before these 16 units were supposed to be completed, there was no update. The town's director of planning initiated contact with Encore, urging them to apply for an extension, which they did. And during the March 2020 council meeting, council approved that extension, which revised the plans to indicate phase 1 would be completed and people would be living in these completed units by the fall of 2021. Note, fall of 2021. That did not happen. In fact, that still has not happened. They are still pretty far off from anyone living there anytime soon. From then until now, and reviewing all of the documentation I've received through Freedom of Information, I don't see any formal requests for extensions, nor has council voted at any time to grant any further extensions, not any, unless I missed them, and I don't think I have. Now, I'm not suggesting there has not been contact with them through ongoing correspondence. I'm just saying officially, there has been nothing done by this council or by the town with respect to that property. Yet that same fall, the fall of 2021, council voted to exercise the buyout clause on the Robinson property. Councillor Gerard, the CAO, and the mayor were right on top of bringing that hammer down, ensuring it would be on the agenda a month before the milestone was even breached for mere footings. The mayor assuring that they were keeping their powder dry. Yet nothing, no concern, no issue with KCA's phase 1 being so far behind. They had already been extended by over a year. They had a fraction of phase 1 started, a fraction. A few shells of a couple of buildings, yet council had no concern. At the same time, you had Roscoe Construction, not just Mike's Clothing, providing you with their commitment and a start date. And that wasn't good enough for you to add a few more months. And while I'm in totally favor of the KCA properties, I'm not trying to take away from it in any way, shape, or form. I think it's great. I'm definitely struggling reconciling the treatment between these two developments. So this is where you can come back and answer me and provide me an answer that it's not just saying we just lost faith in the developer. Our decision to buy back the Robinson property had absolutely nothing to do with our displeasure in Councillor Sabian's continuous push to investigate the letter accusing the mayor and some councillors of step abuse, nothing whatsoever. But then wait, you probably won't come back saying that because you don't respond. We were just mere citizens, mere taxpayers. We weren't worthy of a response. That is the state of affairs here. That's what you have to be proud of. But we all reap what we sow. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Dennis Steele, same address, just a follow-up. What you delivered there was called correspondence. That was sent to you months ago and never made correspondence. At the last council meeting, I specifically asked what policy you were following on correspondence. The mayor explained to me it was your meeting policy. Well, the word correspondence is mentioned in there once. There's no guidance to staff to what constitutes correspondence. So it appears you have an unwritten policy that seems to be very favorable to yourself. If you don't like the comments, you don't include it in correspondence. You can't do that. You gotta have a policy. If you don't have a policy, create one. Your next CAC agenda, put correspondence on the agenda. Not as a placeholder for letters from the public, to figure out what constitutes correspondence. So the clerk there can just say, sorry, your worship, this is the correspondence and this is what's going in. You don't get to willy-nilly pull whatever you want out of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Just in reference to what Sharon and Dennis had said, I'm just going to be blunt.
Name, please.
Marcia McNeil and Kemple, taxpayer. Is there something wrong with the developer that was trying to build on the Robinson property? Like, I'm just going to ask, is this council and the mayor and the CEO, like, are you prejudiced or something? Like, I don't understand when Sharon explained the whole situation with the Encore property versus this property. Like, who would not want a beautiful multi-million-dollar building in Kentville with much-needed residential, much-needed commercial, and the town is going to collect the taxes? Like, it blows my mind to think that you would sit here and not work with any developer. Like, is there something I'm missing, or, you know, does anyone have anything to say? Like, are you guys, you know, are you just being prejudiced against one developer versus another? Like, what is the problem? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the council has legal matters which must be conducted in a closed session. We require a motion to go into the closed session to discuss the agenda items. We will not be returning to Facebook Live for adjournment of this meeting, and the motion is to move into a closed session to discuss the items. Deputy Mayor, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that council move into the closed session. The question is on adoption of the motion to move into a closed session. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried, and the time is 7:38.